Are Leeds United a little bit too thin on the ground at the back? Because we're going into January in what is typically the big transfer period, and everyone is shouting, "We need a 10, we need a number 9." And they're both valid conversations to have, like, completely. They are both positions in which there's a little bit of improvement to be done. But I'm having a look at our squad right now, and I'm thinking, is there something that we need to do at the back? Because Daniel Farke had his press conference today ahead of the Oxford United match, and it didn't feel good. There are a few bits of bad news involved in there. The first of them being that Max Wober was likely unavailable. If I remember right, he had an issue where his knee had a bit of swelling going on, and that was causing him some potential issues, and it'll be a last-minute call, is the way that Daniel Farke put it. And it feels, in my opinion, based on his response, that Max Wober will not be starting this game. At best, he'll be sort of in the rotation. It's why he wasn't seen in the last match, and it's why, presumably, he won't be playing this weekend. In addition to that, Pascal Struijk is set to be 50-50 because he has a hamstring issue. I think it was a bit of tightness that he reported, or a little bit of fatigue, wear and tear sort of stuff. Joe Donahue reported it was 50-50. It is, again, going to be a late call. And normally these two alone being out wouldn't be an issue. Well, could be an issue. They are both centre-backs. They both can fill in at left-back at a stretch. But we've got a little bit of cover around that. So it's completely fine. That's not going to be the biggest of issues. But you need to look at the rest of our defenders in order to fully contextualise this entire thing. First up, Junior Firpo is still out and will be out for a good while, probably towards the end of January. It's been said that he's going to miss the entire festive period, and it depends on whether or not he's going to be injured into February as to whether or not he ends up coming back at all, basically, because we might end up signing another left-back. In addition to that, we had the recent Jayden Bogle injury, which admittedly only kept him out for a match, but still not good to have to deal with, is it? Like, especially when in this past discussion, we've dropped 2 centre-backs, a left-back, and a right-back. That's an entire back 4 that has been injured in the last month. You add on to that Sam Byram is a very injury-prone kind of guy, and Ethan Ampadu literally just got back from a long-term problem. This is where we have to have the question of, are Leeds United a bit too thin on the ground at the back? Because there's also a little bit of a discussion to be had in that, is that affecting us in other positions? So, for example, you consider the Ethan Ampadu thing. A lot of discussion has been had recently about, what if you did a midfield pairing of Tanaka, Ampadu, sit Rothwell in front? That gives you something a little bit different in the 10. You can be a bit more dynamic. You can cause other sides significant problems and ideally win matches a little bit more effectively. And that would be fantastic. But in this case, odds are you're sliding Ampadu back to play at centre-back, unless it's Josh Giavogi, because look at the centre-backs we have. Wober, injured. Struijk, 50-50. Joe Rodon, he's fine. Admittedly, not had a chance to rotate at all. But even then. And then you're down to Ampadu and Debayo. And you don't ideally want to be starting James Debayo after he's played very, very, very few minutes this season. You probably want to bed players in a little bit more effectively, which we have been unable to do with James Debayo to this point. So in this case, we won't be able to try that midfield experiment because, well, you've had to pop Ethan Ampadu in to go next to Joe Rodon. Whilst that was fine enough last season, it's not what you want for the long term. For the long term, more realistically, you want to say, cool, we'll have a little bit more flexibility. But we can't have that because of the players that we've got out, and we're having to fit the Ampadu-shaped peg into the centre-back hole. And admittedly, he is a peg that fits in that hole, but he's not a peg that you necessarily want there. And this is where I'm having a little bit of a further thought on transfer window stuff, because, yeah, sure, fine. 9 and 10 would be fantastic. But is that the most important? Because looking at it, yeah, you can make the argument that put away our chances more often and we win more and we get promoted. But at the same time, if you have defenders that are constantly exhausted, like I feel like our players probably are at this point with the amount of minutes that have been pushed into Struijk and Rodon. And the same for Tanaka and Rothwell. And let's be honest, the same for Brendan Aronson, because we've not got a 10. I think during the recording of this video, because I've tried to go a little bit more unscripted on this one, I've managed to persuade myself that we don't need a 9 and a 10 as the biggest priorities. We need more depth. Because if we've not got that depth, you end up running players into the ground. Because in the wing areas, we've been doing that rotation. We've had Solomon starting, then James starting, then Nonto, then Ramazani admittedly hasn't come back for a full start, I don't think. But there's flexibility there, there's fluidity. But throughout the centre of our side, admittedly not the centre forward, Piru and Joseph are juggling starts between them. Something will work out there in the end. But through the centre of our side, through the centre-backs, through the central midfielders, and to an extent the full-backs as well, they're doing a hell of a lot of running. And Sam Byram is admittedly being rotated, but that feels like that's more due to necessity than choice. Because he's a very, very injury-prone kind of guy. And we're getting to the stage of the season where there needs to be a bit of further discussion on what is the priority. Because sure, we could add another centre forward. That would probably be fine. We'd have 4 at that point, and you'd again be asking yourselves the question of, well, who starts? And I admit, I kind of want to get Dor Turgeman in, but you'd have to get someone out in order to get Turgeman in because balance issues. And a number 10 would be fantastic, and that would give Brendan Aronson a rest, but that is also a contributing factor in the rotation element, in the depth element. Because I feel like with the goals we're scoring and the chances we're creating at the moment, which is a lot, which is one of the highest rates in the league, our issues aren't going to be at the top of the pitch if we don't go up. Our issues are going to be with what we're seeing away from home, with players that are tired and fatigued, switching off for a moment and getting themselves into a situation where they've made a mistake, they're facing their own goal, chasing the ball back, trying to put a desperate tackle in like Tanaka did to give away a penalty, or trying to hunt down a ball after you've been beaten like Pascal Struijk did. Unsurprisingly, he's now injured, which is showing that wear and tear is having an impact. I think, in my opinion, we're likely to get promoted anyway because I'm fairly comfortable with that. I'm fairly comfortable with the squad that we've got. But if we want to sign something to push us over the edge, I don't think that comes in the form of a number 9. I think that comes in the form of increasing that depth that we have at centre-back in central midfield and really making sure that we've got options for when things like this happen. And admittedly, Giavogi can do that. Giavogi can play in central midfield and as a centre-back. Sure, fantastic. But there has to be recognition of the fact that we need a good level of quality in addition to the depth. And Giavogi is a seemingly perfect guy. But I don't know where he is in terms of his quality playing at centre-back. And imagine if Ampadu's injury comes back. Then you've got a centre-back pairing of either Giavogi and Rodon or Debayo and Rodon. And then what happens if Rodon gets a knock? This is where the problems come in. And this is where I think waiting until the end of December to make the decisions on who you need to sign is a good thing, because now we know where we need to fill. And I feel like someone else to play at the back would not be a bad thing at all. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. This was a sort of unscripted, rambly video sort of thing that I thought would be quite fun to do. Let me know what you thought about the format down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're not yet. That's always really appreciated. You could also become a channel member. 99p a month, and you get a bunch of videos and stuff early. So I'd like to think it's worth it. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you later. I remember when I played Sunday League, I was always put a left back. But is that so they could keep me out of the way? Yeah, probably. Toodaloo.